We're live. Welcome to another episode of Enlighten Up with Deb and Div. And we are exploring today the topic of spiritual development and personal development. What are the differences between the two, and how do we know, and how do we balance and honor both? That's what we're going to be discussing today. And what prompted this topic? What prompted this topic for me was a realization that when a lot of people in the spiritual space talk about spiritual development, they're really talking about personal development. And how is it that we know the difference between what is actually spiritual development? Let us start there as a starting point. What is actually spiritual development?
Wow, that is a really great question. And how do you distinguish between spiritual development and personal development? Well, what comes to my mind is that what we're really seeking is not suffering, to have peace and joy. So quite often when we're thinking about personal development, we're feeling like we're suffering in some way. We've got some situation that we want changed in some way. And then the ancient wisdoms tell us, if you want things to go well and you want to have peace and joy rather than suffering, the way to do that is to be without attachment, without preference, kind of not resisting what is. Now, you could think of this in terms of personal development and not spiritual, just operating in the material world, in the physical world. It makes no sense to resist what is, because what is the output or the result of what is already done. It's history. It'd be as stupid as me going, I'm not happy that there was a World War II. Well, it's history. It was. Yeah, I can't change what has happened. And what is here is what has happened. So me learning how to be with what is and utilize and then adapt from there, that's a form of personal development. It sounds like it's a very kind of spiritual approach to things, and yet it actually is a practical way of being.
The image that's coming to my mind is one of those Venn diagrams where, you know, there's that overlapping bit that's the part between the two, the spiritual development and the personal development. And there's the space in between where there's the type of personal development that is of a spiritual nature. And it's both. It's applied to the material realm. How do I not suffer hell? Let me accept what's here. That's the image that's in my mind.
So perhaps it feels spiritual when you take the approach of let me change so things in my life will change. Let me be more capable at responding to what is and utilizing what is rather than resisting what is. So it's a change in the way I be in the world, rather than let me change how I'm doing and what I'm doing in the world. Yet, to me, these are all forms, even though it's more at the being level, it's a different approach to it. It still is personal development.
Yeah, so I'm hearing in that there's a so that, and that's one of the things that would make it more personal development. So there's the element of let me do this so that I get this outcome, so that I which is the subtler form of attachment. So it might not be as obvious in, on the surface, but it's still there in the structure. Let's change how instead of what I'm doing or saying, let me change how I'm being. So again, a more subtle level.
So I have less suffering and I have more peace, so that I'm able to get the results that I want more easily. Yeah. There's definitely a so that in it. So that's a good point.
Spiritual personal development. So what is true spiritual development then?
I have no idea.
Well, I think it's kind of an oxymoron, because development, that word almost distorts it, because development is agenda. And when we and this is the challenge, this is what we're kind of teasing out in this conversation here, is when we are in the realm of spirit and there aren't these words that are distorting and compartmentalizing and the minute we put something into language, the minute we bring it back into the human realm and attempt to talk about it, we've already kind of lost the plot in some ways as far as spiritual understanding goes. And that's why, in the Tao Te Ching, it says, the Tao that can be named is not truly the Tao. And that is the essence of what is spirit versus what is human. And that is the distortion that I see a lot, is speaking of things as though they are without realizing, no, that's just a distortion of something that was experienced in another realm.
Yes. So what's coming to my mind as I hear you talk, what then, if we are going to do spiritual development, which is spirit is full stop. It is full. It is complete. It is not needing to develop. Needing.
You've just muted yourself. By the way, you've just muted yourself. There you go.
There you go. Let me see if I can find my way back. Yes, sorry about that. So what we might want to be.
I don't know why it happened again, but you just deleted yourself again, or muted yourself again, rather. Sorry.
How do we bring the human physical way of operating with a desire to be productive, to be creative, which implies preference?
Again, you've muted. I wonder if you're on your phone and you're having a call come through.
3 times, but then I just said, oh, look, I'm on a video thing. Can I call you back? So we'll be good now. It's, if we're wanting to develop something, it would be develop greater alignment between how we need to operate as a human and an alignment with how we can utilize spirit and the capacity of spirit and the energy to inform the human experience, and how we can have our human experience in a way that it can harness that we could develop. We could develop more and more alignment with spirit, with that spiritual development.
Yeah, absolutely. And your hand gesture just there reminded me of how we ended yesterday's conversation, we threw back to this concept of how do we do that, honoring the human preferences, or the human, recognizing the human's going to have some preferences, because that's what humans do. We have preferences, and to honor that alongside the spiritual awareness that the preferences are well, all preference creates suffering. Like, let us say that. So so how can we, how do we honor both that spiritual deeper truth knowing and the human at the same time? And so when you made that hand gesture of all spiritual development is to come into alignment, to bring the human alignment in, bring the human in alignment with spiritual knowing. What does that look like practically? How do we do that practically speaking?
Well, there are some practices that we can do to help us become more sensitive to guidance. There are practices that we can do to be sensitive to when we're resisting what is. There are practices that we can do so that we become more and more able to understand guidance. Like, just like with humans, we can do some things to improve our deep listening skills. Like, oh, okay, I'll practice reflecting without adding my thoughts in, right? So to these practices we can do to develop our ability to hear in the moment, so that we can implement guidance into what we're wanting to do and achieve as a human. Can you think of other things of how we do this practically? Create alignment, not this disjoint of his spirit, his human, but a kind of a partnership where they operate together.
Well, what comes to me as I hear you say that is basically clear job descriptions. Alignment in, like, I think of it in an organization, a well-functioning organizations, it's people know whose role is, which role is which. Like, it's your job to do this and my job to do this. And then we're able to function effectively and be coherent and aligned as an organization when there's an awareness of whose role is what. So that's what comes to me, and I think about how much of how much the human wants to take on the roles of that's actually not really its roles. The kind of ego psyche wants to kind of protect this self-image, and without guidance and direction from the spirit saying, that's actually not your job. That's not your job. Your job is to protect the body, keep the body safe, look after the body, and you leave the rest to me. Then when there's an awareness of who's doing what, then it's clear in terms of, okay, this falls under this person's domain. The same way, like, if you think about an organization, a HR person wouldn't be the one who's doing the P&L reports. That would be the CFO. It falls to whose role it is, and that's one of the things that creates alignment. It's clear understanding of who's doing what.
Yes, I agree. So I suppose what's also helpful is being able to identify the signals of when there's misalignment, because the ego mind can be very clever in masquerading as inner wisdom. And
But it can,
there are telltale signs when it is misaligned. Can you give some hints or clues about that?
well, I actually had an experience this morning in meditation, and one of the hints and the clues that there was some misalignment was the friction that I felt internally. That is often a clue, and the more mindful we get, the more aware we get, the more we can understand what kind of biofeedback is pointing to what. Like, for instance, those of us, we know the difference if got to go to the loo, got to do a number 1 or a number 2, right? Feels like a different sensation. That there's this biofeedback lets us know, what am I going there for? And so I think it's the same in terms of when we know ourselves well enough to know what's, like, whose voice is speaking internally. Is it the voice of deeper wisdom? Is it just another, is it the ego mind playing its games that it loves to do, you know? And the more often that we tune to it, the more discerning we are, the better we become at noticing those signals. And usually, if there's friction in a particular way, which, you know, each person will understand how that is different in their body, but then that'll usually be a clue. Would you agree?
I agree. I agree that there's some form, there's many forms of it, but there will always be some form of tension or hardness or something other than the quiet, empty ease. Empty, I mean, as in, you know, like that empty feel that's in a forest. Do you know what I mean by that? Like, the forest is still very full of trees and life and movement, but there's a kind of quiet absence of kind of static noise. So that for each person, that is different and unique. What is that static or friction, and what is the quiet, full? And over time, practicing, getting the distinction finer and finer, I suppose that this could be considered a spiritual practice or spiritual development.
I would say that's the heart of the spiritual practice, is really, really tuning into that empty forest, so that we can notice. It doesn't have to be like a loud cacophony, but the slightest rustle in the leaves we can feel, because we've tuned our inner ears so well. And
I hear a lot of people will say to me, I do attempt to go inward to get guidance, but when I do, I don't get anything. And it reminds me of my meditation yesterday, when I was asking, you know, what more do I need to do for my healing and cleaning? And I got nothing. And I asked, are you asking me to do nothing? And I still felt myself just sitting there quiet, doing nothing. And I go, is this what I am to do? Sit quietly. And then I heard, yes. There's nothing you can do to heal. The body heals itself. Create the space for it. So if I didn't have some inquiry, I could go, I didn't get any answer. I asked, what am I to do? And I got nothing. But I was actually in what was required, which was to sit still and quiet. So, you know, inquire about the nothing that you get, because it might be a very profound answer.
Yeah, and I mean that was life-changing for me when you were like, did you ask a follow-up question? Did you ask a clarifying question? The whole concept of, I could ask a clarifying. It hadn't even occurred to me. I didn't understand. Remember I'd come to you and I'd be like, so I got this in meditation. I don't know what it means. And you're like, did you ask? All right, yeah, I could ask. I could ask. And so learning how to partner our wisdom in the process by asking the clarifying questions that really help us make sense of the instructions that we're being given. Really, really.
So this too is spiritual development. This is developing ourselves in a way that we can partner with spirit.
Yeah, and so for contrast now, personal development, how I understand personal development is just the things in the human realm and frame that make it easy for us to kind of tick goals and tick boxes and tick goals and all that, and nothing wrong with those things. It's I suppose it all comes down to what are our priorities in this life, and what is it that we're really wanting to do and focus on. And so the personal development often has a lot of focus on the doing aspect and how am I doing the doing, and that doesn't tend to go beyond the material realm. Those are some of the hallmarks, I would say, that are indicative of personal development. Would you agree? What else would you say is true of personal development? How might it be? How might it be distinct from spiritual development?
Well, I would say one of the distinctions is the I that is wanting to develop is the ego I.
Yeah.
I identify as Deborah Mossman Maas is my official legal name. And when I'm wanting to do personal development, it's that I'm thinking of. Is Deborah the best that she can be? Is she fulfilling her contribution? Is she making a meaningful contribution? And it's very much about the self, which is not a bad thing. It's a very, very good thing. We get this human life to do something valuable and meaningful with. And so I would say the characteristic of personal development is that the thinking is orientated to this lifespan of this person. And is that optimal? Am I improving and being my best and making a meaningful product or contribution?
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, in contrast to that, the spirit is across time and form and boundless in its own ways. And so my sense is we must do both to truly be effective in this lifetime. We must be well-developed humans and have a sense of a functional identity in the world and who and how we are, and in such a way in which that lines up with, there's that alignment with the bigger spirit being that we also are. Yeah. Any more to say, or shall we wrap up there for today?
Well,
smiling and nodding, I'm wondering.
Well, I could close with playing devil's advocate in saying, of course, you and I, feel that it's essential to do both, because that's the value that human and this human holds. is that we have that alignment, and that we are not just finite but infinite, and that we're aligned with the divine. I do see some humans who don't do both, and they still lead very full and meaningful, peaceful, happy lives without considering. Yeah, a couple of people actually came to my mind. I know some very beautiful women, my grandmother's one included, who had a very full life, being quite an earthly mother and grandmother, and led a very fulfilled life and very content life, and didn't really have any deep spiritual pursuit.
I can't imagine how that's possible. I can't imagine how it's possible that one can truly be fulfilled without some spiritual awareness. I simply can't imagine it, and perhaps only because my experience is such that, of course, I'll openly admit my bias. My experience is such that before I had any spiritual awareness, I was deeply unhappy. And in my experience, most of the people that I have come into contact with, that I have spoken to, the truest sense of joy, fulfillment, happiness comes from an awareness that we are greater than this tiny human, this small life, and that perspective. And yet I suppose I could also conceive of there being others that are so content in their humans that that's not the case. So perhaps that's, I guess I appreciate you playing devil's advocate in that way and putting that out there. Yeah.
So it's just a thought to provoke thought. And like the quote that I shared yesterday, I'd rather have questions that can't be answered than answers that can't be questioned.
Oh, I like that. Where did you share that?
Oh, I shared it with some other peeps and not you. So there you go. Just shared that with you. I'll send it to you when we get off the call now.
Okay. All right. Well, that's beautiful. Okay. Well, let's end with that quote. That's a really lovely quote. Say it again.
I'd rather have, answers. Yeah, I'd rather have questions that can't be answered than answers that can't be questioned.
Yeah. Oh, beautiful. Beautiful. That's a good place to wrap up. Leave you with that. Those as some things to think about. And we'll be back tomorrow with another episode of enLIGHTen Up. Bye for now.
Bye.